Good evening, everyone, and welcome. I'm Dr. Toni-Lee Sangastiano, an assistant professor of the practice in the Department of Art and Art History, digital media specialist, and host for this evening's programming, Public Dialogue, Carnivalesque with Sarah Houbolt and Johnathan Lee Iverson. Tonight's programming is also in conjunction with my solo exhibition, Carnivalesque, in the Spagnuolo Gallery, and both Sarah and Johnathan, two amazing performers, are featured in works of art in the exhibition. Artists for generations have been inspired to create works of art about the circus, the sideshow, the freak show, a word that has been reclaimed as a badge of honor by contemporary performers. I continue in this tradition through the canon of art and through scholarship on how the aesthetics of the circus and the sideshow are employed in mass media. As truly celebrated and loved performers who champion their communities and act as powerful role models who have really redefined their crafts, I am thoroughly excited to introduce you to Sarah Houbolt, who is a Paralympian, the National Program Manager for Arts Access Australia, a diversity advocate who champions disability arts narratives and history to include the UN, a freak show, international circus, and physical theater performer. Sarah and I have shared connection through our work for the Coney Island Circus Sideshow, and I last saw her perform pre-pandemic in Coney Island. This performance with the LED hula hoops on the Coney Island stage inspired the painting in the exhibition. As a visual description of the oil painting for accessibility, Sarah's body forms a joyful arc, and the rainbow LED hula hoops form a blurred figure 8. The background abstractly vibrates with arcs of color, and hint of the stage below Sarah's feet grounds the dynamic movement above. I'll give you all a moment to look at that. Thank you, Zoom team. Johnathan Lee Iverson is the youngest and first Black American ringmaster of the iconic near 150-year Ringling Bros Barnum and Bailey circus, which he served until its closing until 2017. He was a member of the Boys Choir of Harlem and has performed before many world leaders and dignitaries. He is known as the Big Top Voice, as you shall soon hear, and was recently in the DMV with Omnium Circus, which brings together an unprecedented, diverse, and multi-abled cast and crew. We also have mutual connections in the circus sideshow community, and I had the pleasure of meeting Johnathan in person in February in DC, where he took some pretty good selfies in front of his paintings. If you look at our Instagram account for Dela Cruz and my Instagram account, you'll see them. I will also describe his portrait. So the multimedia portrait was actually inspired by the last performance of Ringling. And thank you very much. There is an acrylic border with laser cut emojis that are illuminated through color changing LEDs. And it surrounds a painting of an ornately outfitted ringmaster and another performer, Paulo dos Santos, on a floating futuristic carriage against an unlit audience. Thank you, Zoom team. So for tonight's audience, welcome again, and thank you for your presence this evening. For our format tonight, I'm going to ask questions that were given ahead of time to Sarah and Johnathan. I'm sure we could talk all night, but I will respect everybody's time. And then we're going to have a Q&A. You're going to post your questions in the chat, and then I will review the chat at the end of our panel discussion. We are also going to share several links in the chat with everyone to include the show reels for both Sarah and Johnathan, and a link to the virtual version of the Carnivalesque exhibition. And the physical version is actually going to close on May 23rd, and it's in the Spagnuolo Gallery. Great, thank you. All right, so why don't we begin? So this first question, Johnathan and Sarah are going to have 5 minutes apiece to essentially answer this. And for our audience members that may not be as familiar with circus and sideshow, Can you tell us what is the state of circus and sideshow today? Many people are usually surprised that both exist in some way, shape, or form, and based on your own experiences, differences, similarities. And I'll begin with Sarah. Sarah, welcome and thank you.
Thank you. Hello, everybody. It's so nice to be here. It's quite early in the morning in Australia, so where do I begin? So circus and sideshow is a topic that's so dear to my heart, and I love looking at the history of circus and sideshow in order to look at what's happening today, because they're linked, you know, and it's also linked to what's going to be the future of circus and sideshow. So for me right now, the most exciting sideshow culture in the world is in America. We have a sideshow culture here in Australia as well. But it was when I went to Coney Island and when I went and discovered the history of sideshow in America, did this whole artistic world open for me. And it was a real journey. So for me, the history of circus and sideshow is so intertwined, and particularly I'm very interested in the freak shows and what we bring from the historical freak shows into the current day sideshow freak show realm. So I am so humbled to be part of a community of performers with disability who have always been present in circus and sideshow from the very beginning, you know, back in the days where my community was locked up in asylums and had anti-marriage laws and ugly laws and compulsory sterilization and all of these awful social restrictions and really punitive things happening to my people. And then it was the sideshow and the freak show space that was the safe space for us to be. So bringing that legacy forward is really important in the creativity of circus and sideshow, and not forgetting that that's the history, you know, from my perspective as a proud disabled person. So so for me, my practice was all around bringing back a historical freak show performer, Cuckoo the Bird Girl, into current day sideshow, which means that for me, circus and sideshow was always tandem. Sideshow always existed. And for me, I believe that the fringe is the center. Sideshow is where the amazing diversity happens, and the real honest conversations, like segments like You Can Ask Me Anything, or really the boundary breaking spaces where people get to see diversity on stage. You know, it's about the story and the human and what amazing humans can do. So the state of circus and sideshow is really amazing. In America in particular, you've got such a rich history. The one thing that I really cherish about bringing forward from history is that the diversity within sideshow has influenced the diversity within circus, and in particular, just to end sort of my segment of this question, the natural born freaks, so people who are born different, and that is generally an image-based difference. So people with disability, people who identify as a natural born freak, including our transgender communities and whoever can identify as, you know, physically different. So our natural born freaks were royalty of the sideshow. And that is the key thing that I bring forward into our contemporary circus sideshow space. And what that's done is it's influenced companies like Cirque du Soleil, for example, to hire deaf and disabled performers. So the sideshow has influenced the diversity of circus in this contemporary space. And that's what I think is the state of circus today. And I expect that to grow, and I celebrate that.
Great, thank you, Sarah. And Johnathan, let's transition to you.
Well, I would really appreciate it if you could repeat the question.
Yeah, sure, of course. Sorry. So essentially for our audience members that aren't familiar with like circus and sideshow and what the current state is, right? And especially I think with Ringling closing, a lot of people think Ringling, oh my God, that's it. Circus is dead. It's over, right? You know?
Yes.
So what is it about circus and sideshow from your perspective? You know, I'd say more circus from your end, right? And its current state, and, you know, just to kind of catch everybody up.
Well, first and foremost, I want to thank you for making that distinction. I know that's probably, and I'm assuming that's a frustration for Sarah as well, that our particular genres get crossed. Not like we're offended by that. I often correct people when they speak of sideshow as if it's some exploitative, you know, drudgery. And having Sarah here to actually explain and express what sideshow really is and what it's about and what it's meant for people in her community, people who are shunned, people who these assumptions of their humanity are made based on their appearance or how their bodies were formed. And so when you're different like that, or when you're perceived as different, you know, people create these narratives. And it's endemic of the human imagination to always find your own community. And so I would never dare associate myself with something as, in my opinion, as gallant as a sideshow. You know, because it takes creative courage to actually come up with something of that nature in the face of this world and then make a great living doing it. You know, circus for me is really, it's always been a spirit. It's a celebration of living things. That's how I've always seen it. So I'm a huge circus fundamentalist, in the vein of the great Philip Astley, who is the father of the modern day circus, the great equestrian who founded the modern day circus. He designed the circus ring specifically for liberty horses, for horses. And so we know the circus is indeed an abode for living things, a celebration of living things, both human and animal. And that's was my introduction into it, which is saying a lot because I'm a New Yorker, born and bred. The most exotic thing I ever saw growing up was a squirrel. You know, look, we had the great, you know, carriage horses of New York, but you know, I thought that was for tourists and rich white folk. But you know, I very much enjoyed my experience with the circus and continue to, and it is in my blood. We have sawdust in our veins, as we call it. And so the way I see it now, and just to settle everyone's nerves, circus did not vanish when the great American circus known as Ringling Bros and Barnum and Bailey closed. The circus is still thriving. And in fact, I think it's grown. It's grown in many different, it has many different expressions of itself. Now it's a big deal in fitness. You go to different fitness centers and you have individuals who are taking trapeze and chiffon classes, aerial work to build their core, to build their body. They become more flexible, more energetic, more dynamic. You're seeing a lot of those schools and workshops open up all over the country. Also, circus schools have multiplied as well. Circus is still being expressed in its traditional form. You have circuses like the Carnival Circus, circuses like the Loomis Brothers Circus, and you have other circuses that are more dynamic showcases, almost in the vein of theater, like the Bernardo Circus or the Circus Vargas and things like that. So circus has all of these different ways of expressing itself. And now with the circus I'm involved with, I'm blessed to be the chairperson of the board and the ringmaster for Omnium Circus, which is now broadening the tent to showcase multi-abled artists as well. And so, you know, circus still thrives, it still goes on, it still evolves, it's still broadening, as we know. It's actually found this interesting new life in the new media of social media. You go on to TikTok, if you put the hashtag circus, it has over 5 billion views. And so you have personalities within the circus world who've actually built themselves a following individualistically. You also have breakout stars such as the Weber Brothers Circus, the Weber family, down in down in New Zealand, down under. They have the second highest rated show on the Bravo Channel TV, New Zealand. It's called The Circus. and it literally is a reality show about their lives. They're considered they call them the Kiwi Cardassians. They don't like that name, but I don't either, because they actually have
Right.
talent. But they're really introducing the circus to this media-driven audience. So circus is constantly evolving, like the ring it is. It's constantly growing and constantly coming up with new ways to express itself. So I don't think it's possible for it to die, just because Ringling Brothers and Barnum and Bailey shut its doors temporarily, which I knew it would. We forget it closed this was probably, I think, the 4th time it closed. It's a huge undertaking. And so it's like, okay, we got to take a break. It's very expensive to run. Very expensive. You're moving the world's greatest menagerie of animals. You're moving just an immeasurable number of equipment and cargo and all that stuff by train. You have 2-mile-long trains that people live on and travel on, and you have a staff and a cast and a crew of almost 200 people, and that's considered small. This is not like it was in the good old days. The good old days, it was in the thousands. And so right now, from my understanding, Ringling Brothers will be resurfacing in 2023. That's what I've been told. That's what's been reported. And they're going to bring the show out in a new and dynamic way, as they always have. They were, once upon a time, it was under the big top. And then with the Feld family acquiring it, it went into arenas. And so I'm looking forward to seeing how what the new iteration of Ringling Brothers will be. So the circus is alive, it's thriving, it's strong, and it's found new ways of expressing itself, which I think is just most impressive.
Yeah, well, thank you for letting the cat out of the bag, because that was one of my secret questions about Ringling coming back, to see how it evolves. But you're so right about the idea of circus evolving. They're utilizing the current media, right? And it allows more exposure, and then just different ways of presenting the whole art form itself. And I'd like to actually transition to the academic study of circus and sideshow, right? They've been subjects of academic study, but this wasn't always the case. And postmodernism in the 1980s and 1990s really focused a lot on subcultures and created this sort of sideshow renaissance, right? And the performance art as a sideshow renaissance often used performance art as a way to critique the hierarchies and inequities in society. And I think with the sideshow on one hand and the circus on the other, there's a lot of controversy that's come up, or disinformation. And how do you both handle that, right? What are some examples of this, or what do you think is the most misunderstood aspect? And because sometimes I feel like it's a touchy subject, and I know I have, my own ways. But I'm curious, how do you both handle when people bring these controversial topics up? So, Sarah, I'll start with you, and then go back to Johnathan.
Thank you. Oh, this is such a great conversation. I guess the biggest myth, and I think we've both already touched on it, is the exploitation of people with disability inside the performance space of sideshow. And I guess that myth I tackle by just the truth that our history has been told from an ableist perspective of the freak show was bad for people with disability. The sideshow, it's not a space that people with disability should be in. So we've had a journey of correcting the history, and so I'm a truth teller. I share the story of from all the academic papers as well, and also from the anecdotal stories that are around in our world around what life was like for deaf and disabled performers back then. So there is a lot of academic research around the freak show and around exploitation. There's a particular paper called Dangerous Bodies, which was really part of my research and development when I was creating my solo show. So I'm a truth teller. I tell the truth and retell the history as it should be is the way I handle it, to be honest. But also there's nothing better than just doing. there's nothing better than just getting up on that stage and performing, and also asking for the money that you deserve, because the exploitation argument is about, well, cool, this is a job, pay me. So one of the biggest movements at the moment in the disability arts space is around authentic casting. So actually getting the role in the first place, whether it's in live performance like circus or sideshow, or film or TV, and then it's about being paid appropriately. So that's then where I lead the conversation in terms of how do you change this narrative, and how do you combat this on a daily basis. It's like, well, let's look at this as a real amazing profession, because we give to the world as circus performers, as sideshow performers, we give to the world. There's also a lot of research at the moment around how important circus and sideshow are going to be. Sorry, I am lumping them together. They're separate, as Johnathan was saying, but in terms of these performance arts, how important they're going to be post-pandemic and right now pandemic, in terms of mental health, and in terms of how important we need the magic right now. So I guess there is supply and demand. Like we need these art forms right now, and so there is a great space to have this conversation around, yes, you may think it's exploitative, but actually we've always been there, so keep employing us. So that's kind of the conversations I'm involved in.
Yeah, no, that's great, Sarah. And yeah, we definitely need a lot more magic after these past couple of years. So bring it on. And then Johnathan, so with the circus, there are certain controversies that come up, right? Like, how do you handle this? And what comes up most often?
Well, with the circus, especially the traditional circus, most often is, of course, a lot of things center around animals. That's really the main thing we get, in addition to just really the terrible narrative just around the word circus and what it is. And all of the narratives are birthed in a persistent ignorance that's just there, that many people just feel it is their duty to hold fast to. People will defend their beliefs, and evidence be damned. So I had to learn quickly, because I used to be one of those people, the original Facebook fighters, right? I'm gonna make sure I'm right. But I've learned as I've grown older, you can't ensconce yourself in a fool's joust, because that's what it is, because you get pulled in. And what I've learned about people is, even if they are faced with evidence, even if they're faced with the truth, their belief is so that they will stick to that. And it's getting even worse now, despite the fact that we live in an information age that is bar none the greatest in all of human history. So they have accessibility. I mean, I with the animal question, it used to frustrate me so much that people didn't realize, case in point, how just absurd the idea of harming an animal to do the exact same routine for 500 shows a year. The absurdity of that. It would drive me crazy. It would drive me crazy when they didn't know that Ringling Brothers actually was rewarded over $25 million collectively from the ASPCA and the Humane Society of the United States. People didn't know that, and that was in a RICO suit. People didn't know these things, but I tend to leave the arguments to the smart people. And we have our academics and we have our doctors, and amongst them, and I hope we have enough time, I'd like to mention a few. Speaking of those who've really actually rolled up their sleeves and studied the animals in the circus, there's the wonderful Dr. Martha Worthington of the UK. There's Dr. Ted Friend here in the United States. It's amazing if you read their work. It's they both found similar. Came to similar conclusions, and they were on two different continents. You have wonderful historians like Richard Flint. There's Robert Houston out of Pennsylvania, author Steve Ward, author Dr. Janet Davis. There's just a lot of wonderful people. Dominique Jondot, There are a lot of wonderful people and dynamic minds, and there are many, many more who really humanize what it is circus is. I think when it comes down to it, when people don't know something, uh, mythology is what ensues. And so, of course, Sarah has to know exactly what I'm talking about, because that's exactly what happens in sideshow. People, we just make these assumptions about people. And those narratives, not only are they dismissive, they've proven to be dangerous. I'm a Black American male. And, our history, a lot of the damage that's done to my very image, my very personhood, is based on imagery and mythology somebody somewhere concocted and passed along to others in a mass media type of way. And so me relating to the circus was quite ironic, because I really could relate to it and understand it, and thus I became kind of a fierce defender of it, because I understood personally what it feels like to be just judged and marked without even having the opportunity to present yourself and to present the reality of what you are.
And actually, Johnathan, that's a great segue for my next question, which is for you as the first Black American ringmaster, right? Someone who documents circus history as well through podcasts and interviews and other media. Like, how do you see your role and its impact?
I fought with it early in my career, because, when you're young, you're you're more humane than we realize. I see it with my children. When I brought my children on the road, my wife and I, we brought our children on the road. We knew this was it's an immeasurable gift to be able to make a living while having a life. And I could only do that in a circus. And I knew I was giving them gifts. On the other hand, I realized, my goodness, eventually they have to get back to the real world. And I really, my thing was, they're very humane, as children are. They're untouched. They're not traumatized. My children were ensconced in really deep diversity. They were around people whose bodies were shaped differently than theirs. And these things don't, they don't freak them out, so to speak. They were around people of different lifestyles, skin tones, cultures, all of those things. So seeing them move in the world now that we've been civilians is a really interesting thing. I almost envy them. And so, as I was saying, for me, when I first joined the circus, I wanted that for myself. The reality is I had to strike a balance, because whether I like it or not, I am a model for someone. And I didn't have the right to take that away from anyone. And this was for children of all ages. Not only did I realize how important it was, my being was to my elders. And I met many of them, my grandfather included. I have a beautiful memory of him coming to the circus with my grandmother. Seeing your grandparents turn into 6-year-olds in the middle of a circus is the most awesome thing ever. And to hear him say to me, grandson, there was a time I couldn't sit here. I couldn't just sit anywhere. And there you are. This was a man who escaped a lynching because he was trying to unionize workers. So that really gave me an understanding of the responsibility of it. I would meet wonderful ushers, older men and women who would give me their stories. I remember these 2 ushers in particular in Alabama, and they were so sweet. They were like those just sweet aunts that they just kept looking at me, and they would smile, and they approached me and they said, "Son, you have no idea. We couldn't go here when we were girls. We couldn't do this. And to see you out there, and you're so good." And to me, that was the thing. I didn't want to just be a face. I wasn't there just to represent and be a token. My main thing, I was trained in the Boys Choir of Harlem. You had to be good. Like, you had to work. And I wanted to not only, I want to be an ambassador, but I want to leave a mark where it doesn't matter. Like, my work is so good even the biggest racists, let's go, hey, look, he's good, hire him. You know, I mean, that's what I wanted. And, you know, and to a large extent, that's what happened. What I was able to achieve, and I'm very happy about it, was that it opened the door for women performers like Kristen Michelle Wilson, who came and became our first female ringmaster. She was wonderful. I wish she had more time with the show. It opened the door for America's favorite cowboy, Andre McLean, third generation Black cowboy turned ringmaster. It opened the door for others, and it broadened how the circus was looked at. And to me, I was very proud of that. But even more so, I think it did something for the consciousness of so many different children at the time, of many backgrounds, of, you know, whether they were Black or white or whatever. I mean, I still hear from young people today who have now grown up and they've gone to college, and I'm going, my goodness, how old am I? I heard from a young man the other day. He wrote me. He told me, it was mostly, he said, "You were my childhood." I didn't know where to thank him or punch him in the face, but because I was like, man, how old am I? But it was so sweet. And he's an actor now, and I hear from people, I mean, from various backgrounds. And so I understand there's something about presence and representation, just being there. We're seeing it just now with the inception of a new Supreme Court justice, with Her Honor, Ketanji Brown Jackson. That's an extraordinary thing, not merely because, oh, we have a Black woman there. She's so good. To hear her qualifications, she is over the moon good. She's probably the most qualified justice in the history of the Supreme Court. And she happens to be in this shell. She looks like this. And her children, quite frankly, much to some people's chagrin, look like what the new America will look like. And, you know, so it's so much that goes into that. It's not, so yes, to represent yourself, to be out there, to be that, but then to be excellent on top of that opens up a whole new wave. And so to be a part of that class of the first, it's a heavy responsibility, absolutely heavy responsibility. I was blessed and fortunate that I had the road paved for me due to my time with the Boys Club Harlem, due to, I had an activist mother. My mother was one of those nosy individuals in my life. She was always involved. I thought it was nuts and crazy. I am eternally grateful for it now, but she was always involved. Even my dad, you know, in his own, you know, very flaming heterosexual way, was very, very supportive of me in his own way. So I really had it good. It was like I was set up for these kinds of moments in my life. And I think for the most part, I was able to honor it.
Oh, that's really powerful, especially having that moment with your grandparents and just explaining all that. Thank you for sharing all that, Johnathan. That's remarkable. And everything I've read about you, right? Sure, I've seen you perform, but everybody says how amazingly good you are. So it's not a lie.
Oh, thank you.
yeah, that you've redefined it, and you know, anything anyone reads. So great. Thank you, Johnathan. And Sarah, we have some catching up to do. Based on our last phone conversation or Zoom that we did with Sam, right? So you're a champion of disability arts, narratives, and history, and you were just about to go to the Royal Commission. And could you tell everybody what that is and what you were doing and what happened? I want to know what happened, because it seemed like such a powerful moment.
Had the potential to be a powerful moment.
Okay.
So what's really interesting when you are a creative and a diverse creative, and being part of the wave of people who are innately changing the world just by doing the things that you do. And so as Johnathan was saying, there is a responsibility or a need to be able to know how to talk about it and how to talk about your work and how to present it in a way that does affect your audience. So I was invited to perform a little bit of my solo show, Cuckoo the Bird Girl, which was pre-pandemic internationally touring award-winning show about the history of freak show. and in particular this woman who lived in that time. And the amazing thing about Cuckoo is that we have this very similar genetic condition, so I could really bring her back to life and tell the story of what it was back then and how it impacts on us now. So the Disability Royal Commission is this government-initiated research and consultation around abuse, violence, neglect, and exploitation of people with disability in Australia. And it's a long time coming. My predecessors in the disability advocacy space have fought long and hard for an inquiry into the atrocities that happen to our community, not historically, but also like right now. Like, for example, sterilization of women with disabilities still exists. And no one's talking about it. People don't want to talk about it. It's not right. It's a violation of human rights. So that's the kind of stuff that the Disability Royal Commission needs to uncover and document, and so that we can create pathways for change and to stop these atrocities from happening. So the commission asked me to perform at the commission and be a witness on women's violence. And we haven't caught up, and I'm so sorry. So it's a great question, but I actually pulled out of the opportunity because it wasn't safe for me and it wasn't respectful to the craft. So that's all I can say about it in this public forum. But the importance of the commission existing is great. And there are many, many, many more stories to tell beyond the work of the commission that cannot and will not get lost because we are still living and breathing and will tell them.
Yeah, no, Sarah, I'm sorry. I did. Yeah, sure. And I did see.
No, that's okay. Yeah. It's one of those tricky questions where I'm like, oh, how do I answer this?
Yeah, no, but I get it that you can't reveal it.
Yeah. What was really interesting, what's super interesting about the experience of it though, is where art has been invited to create dialogue. And so that is the power of a live performance, whether it's circus or sideshow, is like we have the power to create the dialogue. And you know, as Johnathan was mentioning, that dialogue is so important, and we cannot let any myths slip into becoming these mass prejudices and mass harms to our people. So that's the exciting part about the experience, is that that door was like just a tiny bit open, and in the next time it will be a bit more open. So, you know, but what was amazing, and what we talked about in our Zoom, Toni-Lee, was that when I was in New York performing at the Coney Island Sideshow, there was like, I would be one day at the freak show, you know, like 7 shows a day, 5 days a week, and then the next day I was at the UN talking about women's violence. So these are the cool things where it just crosses over, and it's like, oh wow, that's my life. It's great. You know.
Well, yeah. And then
there'll be more opportunities.
I'm sure there will be. And speaking of myths, right? I actually I'm going to read some recent media headlines that kind of tie into this idea of myths. So this is from July 27th, 2021, from masslive.com. Committee in January 6th riots at U.S. Capitol cannot be a sideshow. Or how about The Guardian on July 4th in 2021? The new circus comes to town. Fiery support for Donald Trump at a rain-soaked rally in Florida. Or let's go back to 2016. Editorial, Clinton-Trump debate resembled a carnival freak show. Richmond.com, September 28th, 2016. Regardless of your political association or affiliation, metaphorically, the words circus, sideshow, and freak show, they're often used as negative insults or slurs, especially in politics. And during 2016, which was an election year, both the circus and the sideshow spoke out about it using mass media, which I documented as part of my dissertation research. And we're actually going to share a couple links with everyone in the chat. The first is a link to a short silent film about language in media based on, these were Google keyword alerts on circus, sideshow, and freak show. And I've been collecting them since 2016. The film is also featured in the Carnivalesque exhibition, and the second link presents a larger visual analysis for those who are interested in some of the data. And Johnathan, Ringling Brothers Barnum and Bailey Circus had an entire social media campaign, right? I was screenshotting, writing about it in my dissertation. It was hashtag take back the circus, right? And then the circus wants the circus back. Okay.
Right.
Can you describe the campaign for our audience and the memes, right? Kind of the climate that was happening in 2016. And what was it like to counter this? I want to know what it was like for you to be part of this, because sometimes, well, as the ringmaster, you were center stage in a lot of those memes. How did this come about? I'm dying to know.
Yeah,
for years.
For some reason, when I was in that top hat, I liked a good fight. And for years, I'd been, my thing was for us to be proactive about that. We discussed it for years, and not just Ringling Brothers, but many other institutions. Circus is a sawdust mafia, so we all kind of share the same core beliefs, and that was one of our deeply held frustrations, is that our genre, this thing we love, this thing we call home even, was thought of in such a negative and low way when you consider really what circus actually has meant to society. I left it on my Facebook fan page. I have it actually pinned, but there's a wonderful illustration of it written by Jamie Clubb about, what the circus has meant to society, what it's meant to the place of women. Circus was actually one of the first fields of endeavor that would take in ex-slaves. Circus it's always kind of been this place where, really the rule is just, you better be who you say you are, and you can lift yourself and build. You had wonderful Black entrepreneurs of the circus. Ephraim Williams, back in that time, he was known as the Barnum, the Black Barnum. I mean, the guy was highly successful. You could have dignity. You could do something with your life. I mean, the idea of circus being chaotic was always strange to us, because the U.S. government actually came to Ringling Brothers to learn logistics of how to unpack and load their trains. We've been a part of the lexicon, hold your horses, toss your hat in the ring, things of that nature. I've always believed that circus is the craft, the art that all others aspire to. And if you look at them, what's everybody trying to do? What are the movies that sell the most? The ones that, have the most adventure and the most daring, and they don't necessarily get the Academy Awards. I mean, we can't even name half the movies that win those Academy Awards because nobody cares. You care about Marvel, you care about the effects and all of those things. And you see circus elements in so many different genres, but we're kind of like the Little Richard of it, all of it. Nobody wants to give us credit for anything, so it's a culmination of various frustrations in that respect. And it wasn't about hey, we're not getting credit, but it's one thing to be shunned, it's another thing to be demeaned. And looking at the 2016 election, which was deeply contentious and quite frankly, in my opinion, disgusting, and we're still suffering the remnants of that. To even associate circus or sideshow or even carnival with that is, to us, I think it was the last straw. It was highly disrespectful. Even recently, and I shared a post on my social media accounts of journalist Jim Acosta, who actually he received a letter from someone in our circus community, basically chiding him about comparing a certain politician's campaign to clowns and things of like that nature. And he actually, on air, he conceded, that's an unfair comparison, to actually compare him to clowns. And so I think slowly but surely, especially as we move into new media, our goals are being set to really dismantle that narrative, because that's the most important thing ever. If you can dismantle it's controlling a narrative. It's really controlling a narrative. You you have to be in control of how your story is told, or it can go off the rails, and it could be very dangerous. This is something, with great respect, that I think the Jewish people know very well and are very good at guarding. It's something I respect about Jewish nations, Jewish people. They really guard their narrative well, and as well you should, because they understand firsthand what happens when someone else takes your narrative, and all they have to do is turn you into something. And people don't really realize how serious this is, but I remember a former gangbanger saying this. It was the most remarkable thing. He said, "Why do you think we get high? Why do you think we use the N-word so prolifically?" He said, "Because it's hard. Because do you understand how strange it would be for me to go up to you with a gun and say, 'Give me your wallet, brother'?"
Oh.
See,
Wow.
if I have to, before I can kill you, I have to demean you. I have to change your narrative. And by changing your narrative in the world, it just makes it seem like it's no big deal. And so that's why when we closed, it was really disturbing to see even fellow artists, especially in the Hollywood industry, who were sort of celebrating the end of an American icon, the end, but not just the end of an American icon, the end of fellow artists' jobs, their livelihood. People were celebrating that. There was one powerful actress on ABC. She had a big old thing on her Instagram. I mean, this person had never been to our show ever, never talked to any of us ever. So the arrogance in it was just mind blowing to me, but she wasn't alone. And these are the kinds of things that occur when that narrative has been stolen. And it's our responsibility as circus participants to make sure we're vigilant with it. And we have to be more vigilant, and we have the tools now. And I think 2016, we really begin to sort of strike back and say, hey, listen, no, this is not what we are, and this is not what we're about. And I think we're going to continue to make inroads going forward.
Yeah, no, I agree. And then using the same like mass media tools to kind of take back, control of that narrative, right? And it seemed like those words, there was an uptick in how many times they would appear in the headlines. And that's sort of what inspired doing the Google alert keywords. But it's not just in the United States, it's all around the world. And Sarah, in Australia, sideshows came up as like a literal sort of like music, sideshow to the main stage, but not always. So can you comment on how those words are used in Australia and your experience of it, and tying into this idea of perpetuating these negative myths?
Yeah, oh my gosh, it's been so powerful to hear you talk about what's happening in America. Well done to both of you for how you're changing the narrative. In Australia, we also see the term circus used in a similar way in media and in everyday conversation, particularly like it's not my monkey, it's not my circus, and I'm like, what? And the sideshow space, we have large exhibitions, showgrounds, and we have like a sideshow alley where there's the games and the arcade stuff that you'd see in Luna Park. So we have that kind of nature of sideshow. I was talking to someone the other day and they were like, oh, is there live performance in sideshow? Because people think of just the moving clowns where you put the ball in the clown's mouth kind of games. That's the mass understanding of sideshow in Australia. We have great contemporary sideshow performers in Australia and circus performers. Australia is known as a very strong country in the space of circus and sideshow. And a lot of our performers go into corporate gigs. So they take the sideshow and circus into really arts business and earning money and being really powerful business people, to be honest. So yeah, we do need to change the myth of what circus is, because it's actually arts business and it is creating the magic for audiences, but actually it's a very savvy way of being in this lifetime. So we have a similar thing, but I suspect it became more potent in America in the last few years, but definitely we need to safeguard that narrative as well. I always look to structural solutions as well as language solutions. Like, how do we change this demeaning nature general concept of circus. And it's like, well, a lot of time in arts funding realms, for example, where other artists and performers are able to apply for funding, circus is often missed out, and there's been a structural legacy of that as well. So what are the other solutions, as well as really calling it out, but what can we do structurally in terms of your exhibition, for example, Toni-Lee, and how powerful and important it is for universities to take it on board and champion this narrative as well and hold the space for it, but also our local, state, and national arts funders actually really getting behind the art form itself. So there's many ways that we can create a little bit of a groundswell, I think. And I'm up for it. I'm in. I'm with you.
All right, I'm in too.
Yeah.
Thank you, Sarah. Your comments remind me, I believe it was in the 1980s, and it might be in Rachel Adams' Sideshow USA book, as well as a few others, where with the Coney Island Circus Sideshow and I think other entities, you could not, if you were applying for an NEA, National Endowment for the Arts grants, the culture was such you did not want to use the word freak show or you'd get ruled out. So, kind of reflective of that.
Yeah, it's also in promotions. We have, right. I have a huge problem with how to market my show. It's like, I am talking about a story of the freak show, and this is a good thing. But if I use that word in my press releases, for example, or in my flyers, it doesn't help bring audience. So there's a lot of work to do in terms of taking away that stigma and really changing that narrative, as you both were talking about. And it is the role of media and media, as you were looking at in your study, and as Johnathan was saying, it's media owning up to how they are portraying us and making it part of their ethical guidelines. In Australia, we have the Media Entertainment Alliance, and we have the press club, and we have the advertising standards. And so it's in that space as well that I now call for like real consciousness around and how we're discussing this. So I believe in tapping on the shoulders of all the agencies that actually can regulate this stuff. So I'm in.
Yeah, and in 2016, the sideshow, so Coney Island Circus Sideshow, there's a mutual performer we know. It was on the Trevor Noah's The Daily Show. There's a whole segment sort of speaking out against it, which is actually really funny. Well, some people might not think it's funny, right? But kind of, it's really, I think, the first time, certainly in my lifetime, and I think in recent history in the past century, that the circus separately in the sideshow has used that media platform to very clearly speak out against these negative myths and metaphors. So it felt like something that, we need to talk about, and dismantling that language and that use of it and what it does.
We do. And to be honest, anyone who's gone to a circus or sideshow needs to buy into this narrative as well, because you've come to see us. You've come to see us perform, and you valued it and you enjoyed it. So back us up is my message.
Preach, sister, preach.
Yeah. Right from the other side of the world.
No, listen, that's been a thing for me as well. I just can't. I'm so glad we're in sync with that. I would say that respectfully to our audience is that more than anything, we need you to be advocates. I mean, you're not just being entertained, and we appreciate you coming and keeping our art alive and supporting us and helping us pay our bills. But I think it's something that, and I think it's something we stress in our respective fields as artists, is we want to educate our audience as well as entertain them. My motto is, we entertain, we engage, and we enlighten. And I think, I would challenge the audience to delve deeper into what we are. We're not just entertainers. I mean, we're people. This is our lives. It's just not something we do. That's the beauty, I think, to me, of sideshow, and that's the similar thread we have. A lot of people, the beauty of sideshow to me is that, sideshow artists have taken what they are and turned it back at the world. It said, this is me, this is who we are. And they're saying, listen, we don't need you to try to make us into what we're not. You know, this is who we are. And that's really at the heart of it. That's what the commonality is with these are. I think the beauty of circus and the beauty of sideshow is that, in fact, no one plays these things. No one goes into a acting method to become these things. You really are. I've never met a clown that isn't really a clown in their very essence. And it's not something you play. I'm really a ringmaster. Like, I've had to accept that. Like, I have no fear of any stage. I just do it. People have asked me for years. I used to have a GM, my general manager on the circus. I think he's like, how do you just get up there and start, you know, how do you just cover like that? How do you improv like that in front of thousands of people? And I said, it's just what I do. I don't know. It's in me. It's just it's my superpower. How does the Hulk turn into the Hulk? He just does. That's his thing. Iron Man does his thing. You know, Wonder Woman does her thing. And that's really what we are, you know. And just a side note, I mean, we were always once upon a time thought of as the original superheroes. And so in many respects, we're that here on Earth and alive and real, and you can touch us and see us, but we do invite our audience to, I really would like to see a renaissance of circus and sideshow and even carnival education for our audience. And yes, tell the good, the bad, and the ugly. We you know, I'm not into burning books or trying to limit what the stories are. You know, you know, there's a good, bad, and ugly story to everything. And I think the more the audience knows about us, the better their experience, and the more they can advocate too, and really help pass on what it is we are and evolve it for generations to come.
Yeah, and that ties directly into Sarah about like creating spaces, you know, for these arts, you know, for exhibitions, for these conversations, which is why I think this is so powerful to have the both of you here today. And I feel very excited and blessed and grateful for both of your presence today. And we are almost at the top of our hour, so I think I'm going to open it up to audience Q&A now, or in the spirit of sideshow, we can do an Ask Me Anything segment as well.
Maybe that's where Q&A came from.
Yeah, right.
I'm going to claim it.
Okay, let's claim it. All right, so let me go ahead here and take a look. All right, let me scroll down. Okay, so I have two quick questions here. This is could Sarah comment on the photograph behind her? And okay, go ahead. We'll start with that.
Yeah. Absolutely. I put a virtual background on in Zoom, and it is the cast photo of the 1932 film Freaks. So it's directed by Todd Browning. And he was given money to make a film. He wanted to make a film about the carnival, the freak show, the circus. And it's an amazing film. And we hold it up as a revolution. We, as in the disability community, disability arts community primarily, hold it up as a revolutionary film that had authentic casting and people with disability in lead and speaking roles at a time where we were shut away from society. As a consequence, the film got banned for 30 years for being too controversial because we were on screen, which is a load of, anyway, it's a shame that was the case. And so it's now evidence that we were always present in the art form, which is a strong argument to keep us in authentic casting roles. So if you have a character that has a disability, cast a disabled actor. It's that simple. So it's a powerful part of history, and it's also, for me, I put it as a Zoom background because of the honouring and the legacy of those who have gone before, and never forgetting their role in our performance space. So it's a cast photo of Freaks.
Great. That question was from Elizabeth Pralinger, and she actually has one more question. Could you comment on the use of the words circus, sideshow, and freak show without the definite article? That seems like a hard one anyway. Anyone want to take that one up? Without the definite article. Do you mean
what do you mean by definite article? What do you mean by that?
Is it Liz, is it about like using using those words itself, or not being able to describe it without like using it? Can you clarify?
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
Potentially, well, I mean, for me, my whole artistic practice has been about reframing the word freak show into something positive. So I guess that's my first thought, but I'm not sure what the question is.
Okay. Now let's see if Liz will add a little bit more clarification. In the meantime, I'll go on to, go ahead, Johnathan, do you have any comments about that or any ideas?
No, it looked like Liz was explaining. I think she says, I mean, the sideshow instead of sideshow as an entity. Does that make sense? I think that's the question. I think she's elaborating on that.
Right. Okay. Comment on the use of the word circus, sideshow, and freak show without the definite article. I mean the sideshow instead of, oh, I see. So when people think about like the sideshow as opposed to the sideshow, it's almost like there's a superlative associated with it. And I could see that something like it's the circus, like maybe Ringling Brothers was considered the circus, right? And you know, that may not at the time, like from a pop culture standpoint, right?
No, it was considered the circus, you know. I mean, and that's why so many people thought everything just stopped when we shut our doors. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, and I see and Liz says you say sideshow, not the sideshow, right? Why do we say that sideshow instead of the sideshow, right? What do you think, Sarah?
I don't know, but I know from my arts practice that if you put a "the" in front of anything, it seems to be more important. But I think in terms of the language and in terms of those words, I don't know how to answer this question, but my thoughts are around, you know, given the conversations we've just had about reframing the words and making them more positive and not making them derogatory in our media, I'd like to use the word circus as magic and adventure and humanity, and sideshow as where the good ideas come from, or where we break the fourth wall, or where we create real conversation and present diversity, you know. And with freak show, it's a place where we belong. It's a place where everyone is respected for who they are. It's a place where leadership can happen. It's a place where we are humans. So, you know, I don't know what the question is. I don't understand it. So sorry, Elizabeth.
Oh, yeah.
But you know, that's my reframe. So in terms of this sideshow, in terms of an entity, in terms of an entertainment space, fine, we have sideshows, but in terms of sideshow and in terms of freak show, that's for me the essences.
Right. Thank you, Sarah. And we have another question. This is from Andrea Galelli-Hueso. Thank you, Toni-Lee, for gracing our Spagnuolo South Gallery with your art, for bringing back awareness to circuses and sideshows, and for putting together this fabulous event. A question for you and your guests. Do you think a post-COVID world will result in a renewed interest with in-person performances?
Oh, yeah. We're already seeing it.
Yes.
You know, when we met Dr. Toni-Lee, and I was with Omnium, which is the brand new circus. It's only a year old. We played a packed house at the your new Capital One Hall, excuse me, out there in McLean, Virginia. It's beautiful hall, and you know, over 1,500 seats. We essentially sold out 2 shows, and the reception was just phenomenal. It was absolutely phenomenal. And not just for us, we're seeing this with various different circuses. I'm familiar, I follow the Venardo Circus. My wonderful friend Kevin Venardo's, that's his show. He presides over it, and it sells out constantly. Various other circuses, it's the same thing. So people are thirsty to get back to that live energy. You know, you can't get it on Netflix. No offense, Netflix. And believe me, if you ever gave me a contract, I'd jump on it. But the reality is, you know, there's something about just being next to other people and other living beings, enjoying something pure and magical and just off the wall. And I think circus, I do believe, and maybe I'm speaking as too much of an optimist, but I think circus will see a new renaissance personally. And adversely, also I think that will work out well for sideshow and other genres, similar genres. I think because, quite frankly, these are the purest forms of entertainment. Not only is it high quality entertainment, and that's the key, it's high quality entertainment. These are really fantastically skilled individuals and animals if you're going to see a traditional circus, but it's also, it's the element of taking people away. And, as a clown taught me, he said, our job is to take them away. They come with their we're the original bring us your tired, your poor, your humble masses yearning to be free. They want to be free from their humdrum worries, in their ordinary days. And that's what we're for. We can fly, we can do daring things, we can talk to animals, and the animals look like they can talk back. And, so people are longing for that again. And I honestly believe our genres will see a most wonderful resurgence, and it will vault us into a new renaissance, so to speak.
Yeah, and Sarah, what do you think? Do you agree? I mean, Zoom is connecting us today. I know I saw you in a Zoom program, discussion, right? And Zoom was kind of during the pandemic, almost like a refuge and a means of connection for so many performers that were isolated. Where do you think we're headed next? Are people thirsty for all this entertainment?
I agree with Johnathan. Look, I'm in Melbourne. Melbourne now has a tagline: the most lockdown city in the world. We've had heavy lockdowns, and we've stayed in our houses for years. So yes, people are itching to come out and see live performance. Currently, we've got the Melbourne Comedy Festival on at the moment, and everyone's going to it. We're free now. We're able to go out and see stuff. And I think I agree with Johnathan. The place of circus. I think of the kids. I think of the kids who have been in lockdown and the parents who have homeschooled their kids for a long time. And how the magic of the circus is going to be so entertaining, yes, but therapeutic and cathartic and inspiring, and so important to our recovery as humans that have gone through trauma and collective trauma. That's the feeling in Melbourne. I don't know what it's like over there, but that's our feeling here. And I guess my take on it. And similarly with Sideshow, it's the places where conversations and healing can happen after everything that we've collectively been through. So those studies are coming out, as I mentioned before, the circus and mental health stuff. And I think it's very real, and I think it's going to be great for ticket sales and great for people and our humanity. So yes, I see it. I see people who are going to flock to the circus as well. I agree. I think it's going to be great. Yeah, now's the time to put on your show, folks.
Yeah, there's some ticket buyers or people saying they're going to buy tickets in the chat and the Q&A.
Right. But it has its place, and that's entertainment,
Right. So, well, it looks like we have another question from Steve Warner. And it says, I think this might be from Johnathan, for Johnathan. It says, with your energy on full display and your character being so personal, how do you keep the energy at what seems to be 120% all the time for the audience? I was with Ringling for 5 years and was always amazed at this ability.
Well, you're very kind, Steve. And I hope you got that money I sent you on PayPal to ask that question. Thank you so much. That's very kind of you. I think when you're when you're aligned with what you're designed to do, there's just, it's kind of the reward that comes with it. I was speaking with the woman who trained me in media relations today, and she just joined our board at Omnium, and she hadn't been in the game for a while, but she's like, after that first board meeting, I couldn't even go to sleep because my brain was just racing. And it's just so funny to me. I said, because you're back to being who you are. I think, P.T. Barnum said it best: unless a man enters upon a vocation intended for him by nature and suited to his peculiar genius, he cannot succeed. And what happens is, I think the edict was correct. Seek ye first the kingdom of God, and all these things shall be added unto you. I think when you find your kingdom, you find your thing, it gives you life in and of itself. And of course, you have to be careful. I didn't realize how tired I was when I would go on vacation. That's how I knew how tired my body was, because I would drop for a week. I wouldn't do anything because I was running on adrenaline. I was running on the excitement and the responsibility of doing what I did. And it's pretty hard to have a bad day when, your career is the circus. I mean, who do I go to? It's really hard today. I mean, oh my goodness. Yeah, poor me. I'm around gallant, gorgeous animals. I'm around the most daring and glorious bodies in the world, and I get to see, and I get to, see how the sausage is made, and it's still wondrous to me. I mean, I think that always fueled me. I don't think even when I had days where it was like drudgery, I can say for certain, I never had a boring day. I never had a day where I didn't want to be there. I never had a show where I could just phone it in. That's impossible, because, circus, unlike a lot of live entertainment entities, it's really a living, breathing thing. Anything can happen. And I don't mean something wrong or terrible, and most of the time something wrong and terrible didn't happen. Most of the time just some outlandish thing would happen. And, I just have to be on. And I think having that responsibility kind of kept me up, knowing that my superpower was that. I didn't fly it. I didn't talk to animals. I don't do anything daring, but my superpower is my ability to step into the gap when reality kind of invades the fantasy we're trying to make. And so that kind of was my thing. So I had to stay awake. As a good friend of mine used to say in the Ringling Brothers band, he said, I don't think people realize how exhausting it is to be mentally alert all the time. Like, you just can't, just go and daydream in the middle of the show. You don't know what's going to happen. No matter how well you know it, every show is different from the last. So I think it had everything to do with the responsibility and the joy of being ringmaster that really propelled me to just stay on as much as I could.
Thank you, Johnathan. And Steve says, amazing. I have to say, I felt the same way. And Sarah, I remember when I saw you in a previous Zoom, you had spoke about like your rigorous schedule of training, right? Because you have so many different talents, and it really requires an enormous amount of physical strength. Do you feel the same way as Johnathan? Like, tell us more.
Yeah, I love the creativity of making work, and I love, I often in the acts I create and in the performances I do, whether they're 5 minutes or whether they're an hour, I purposely choreograph in a moment for audiences to take me in as a human. I know they need it. I know they need that. Oh, who's this? Oh, how do I feel about this? Oh, look at what she's doing, kind of moment. And I that is part of why I do what I do, what gives me the energy and drive to keep going, because it is that representation and authenticity. And I guess we shouldn't need to do that, but I love it and I want to do that. So I'm also driven and energized by being in the space. And yeah, the rigorous routines and the rigorous training I love. It's such a healthy lifestyle. And I don't know, I love giving to the audiences. I'm not sure how to answer that more. It is intrinsic to who we are, as Johnathan was saying.
That makes sense.
And I love also one of the tenets of our craft is use what you've got. And that's such a motto, use what you've got. So my eyesight is not very good. In Australia, we call it legally blind. I think in America it's registered blind. And it's I see a little bit, but that means that I can do blindfolded performance or prosthetics work or have anything covering my head and still do the trick, because that's how I live in the world anyway. So that's the kind of stuff I love to bring to the performance that gives me energy as well. It's like, well, you think it's really it's like I'm just using what I've got, but it's great for people to watch. So it's valuing.
Yeah,
I love that.
That's
Use
cool.
what you got.
Use what you got.
My
Use what you got.
eyesight stinks
Yeah.
too.
Yeah.
I'm trying to get
Use what you
sympathy.
got.
Yeah. I'm so, and I do. It's so
Yeah.
funny. I'm nearsighted. It's so pathetic. It's so people always go, you look so comfortable up there. You have no fear. I said, I can't see you.
Yeah, it's a blessing, isn't it?
It's like everything's a blur. And people,
Yeah.
it's so funny. The one thing I used to get was people were like, you were looking right at me. I was like, okay, sure. You know,
Yes, I was.
I was. That's right, man.
Yeah. Exactly.
Well, it looks like we have one more question, right? It's almost a double question. And that is, what were your dream jobs as teenagers? How did you know you wanted to work for the circus or sideshow, right? Do that type of performance? And what were your friends and family's reactions when you started? So dream jobs as children,
Yeah.
right?
Mhm,
How did you
mhm.
know like this was your thing, right? And then family friend reactions.
Ooh, wow. My dream was revealed to me at 13 years old on a trip to Japan with the Boys Choir of Harlem. It was my second trip to Japan, and I'd been I was on the same bill. We were on the same bill as the great Placido Domingo, and he came out to sing, and I lost my mind, and I didn't know the human voice could do that, and everything in my cellular structure, my nerves, everything lit up, and I knew that's what I'm supposed to do something with his voice, and I knew it, and I fell in love with Placido Domingo. I was like this, and what was beautiful about it is I wasn't thought of as strange. Like I had a great deal of support, even from my friends. You know, they knew, oh, that's that kid, he's in the opera and he's in the choir. And my friends were kind of protective of my dream, you know, because I was the lanky, tall kid who didn't play any sports, you know, and other guys who didn't know me would laugh and they'd like, yeah, but he goes to Japan during the summers and he's doing this, that, and other. So I was kind of this alternative cool, you know. But it's amazing how our roads are crafted, right? So we have these journeys, and I think it's a little bit of a mix, you know. I personally think God is a prankster, because, you know, he'll give you a desire and you think, oh, I have my plan, I have my course, I'm the captain of my own ship, and he's just giggling in the background and going, watch this. And then he threw me this beautiful curveball right after college, because I graduated I graduated the Hart School of Music of the University of Hartford. I'd finished studying with the late great Jerome Pruitt, and the idea was to go to Europe and to live over there with another teacher I met. We were going to live there and really start developing and studying the craft even more. So I just needed to go out and make some money. And while auditioning for something totally different, I get this strange call about, hey, what would you think about auditioning for Ringmaster, Ringling Brothers, and Barnum Bailey? And they were so insistent that they wanted a singing ringmaster. They said, we're looking for, and I had no idea that Ringling Brothers or circus in general had a really fantastic musical legacy. You know, names like P.G. Lowry, that's a big deal. This was the guy who was very instrumental in introducing jazz to the general public, because circus is somewhat instrumental in that, because remember, we went to the masses and this new music was going to masses of people. So, you know, things like that, you know, circus calls to you. That's what it comes back down to. It comes back to what P.T. Barnum said about your peculiar genius. So here I am going on this road of, I'm going to be an opera singer. I'm going to do this on the stage, you know, the so-called legitimate work. And I'm going to do those things. I didn't know that those things were really just preparing me to do what became a real passion for me. And that's what and what was ironic was all of those tools I learned from the Boys Choir of Harlem, all the traveling and the touring and the interacting with people and meeting heads of state and really knowing how to be an ambassador, all of that came into play as my role of ringmaster. All the training I got on my voice came into play because I needed it. I mean, you're doing up almost 500 shows a year. You're doing a lot of press events. I'm singing at ballparks, the national anthem, and all these things. So my voice got a lot of mileage. If I did not have that kind of training that I get, there's no way I'd be talking to you. I'd probably be talking to you with one of those machines on my neck or something, because it really called for me to use my body. And I needed that kind of training that that opera singers do get. And I always tell a lot of people who reach out to me about, hey, they want tips about becoming announcers or ringmasters or whatever. And the first thing I usually tell them is go find a really good voice teacher. You're going to need, your voice is your golden ticket. And so, the main thing is that go find out how to really use it, because you're going to, I went through everything. I went through all sorts of ailments. I'm fortunate I never had nodules or polyps I had polyps once and they magically disappeared or something, but I never had nodules. I never had to go under the knife. My technique was built really solidly, and Ringling Brothers they were pliable enough to aid me in, helping me improve, where I needed it, because they never had anything like that where, the demands they were putting on me. I needed, so it was very new for both of us. But, to answer your question, circus calls to you, and that's how it is. It's like being, what was the character, Neo in the Matrix? That's what it was. Yeah, that's exactly what it was.
Yes.
How can you say
I
no
agree.
how can you say no? Because nobody I knew would have that on their resume. Okay, good. You went to the Metropolitan Opera. Good for you. I was at Madison Square Garden. You know what I mean? It's different. Of course.
It's great. And so, Sarah,
God.
so what was yours? Your dream job as
so true. It's so true. So I'll start with what Johnathan just said, that circus calls to you. My great grandfather, my mother's grandfather, all my family is from the Netherlands, and so my parents migrated to Australia. So my great grandfather was a magician, and one of the earliest he invented dove tricks. And this was like early 20th century, and he would shovel coal in the boats from Amsterdam to get to New York to perform his magic. And it's like there was this pull. I never met him. I didn't know about circuses before starting circus. And then there was this pull and pull and pull to discover the freak shows, to discover this whole journey that then took me to performing in New York, where my great grandfather was performing. And there's that level of my story. And then there's also the Cuckoo the Bird Go reclaim level of the story of same genetic condition, bring her back to life. So it was this pull, exactly what Johnathan is saying. It's really incredible. But as a child, I was performative, but I was channeled into sports. So I was channeled into swimming, and then I kept competitively swimming, and I swam at the Sydney 2000 Paralympic Games. So I'm an Olympian. And then I swapped that chin-up bar for a trapeze bar, because same physicality, but just a more creative expression is allowed in circus. So it's really interesting for me to watch people talk about sport and then talk about art. And for me, they're the same discipline. They're the same level of performance. And so the revered, particularly in Australia, we revere sports, but it's the same skills in circus performance. And so I went from circus and contemporary circus, so aerials, acrobatics, hula hoops, into the sideshow freak show stuff. And that's my great grandfather's spirit. That's his fault going into sideshow, I think. He's like, just push me into it. So,
wow, that's great. Yeah, I totally didn't. I didn't know about your grandfather. That's a pretty incredible story. And it actually,
cool. That is awesome.
really
it's spooky, isn't it? It's very Yeah, I strongly believe it. I'm like, I didn't know. And then he's a dove magician and I'm Cuckoo the bird girl. And I'm like birds and doves and what the yeah.
Oh, that is so wild.
I
you
know.
That whole
Wow.
generational thing. Fun fact about my granddad,
Mhm.
my maternal grandfather, who I mentioned earlier. So legend had it that he himself was quite the singer. Like, I mean, it's funny because people would get silent when they talk about it. It was like they were talking. Oh yeah, man, he could really. Back then in the South, especially in the black church, the big thing were these gospel quartets. So great artists like Sam Cooke came out of that tradition. Sam Cooke started. If you really want to hear Sam Cooke sing, pick up Sam Cooke and the Soul Stirrers. That's when Sam Cooke was singing. You know, he could always sing. He's just a beautiful voice. But when he was doing his gospel, he was a killer. And my grandfather was in that kind of world. And so it's so interesting to me to find out, oh, I'm not as unique as I thought, because sometimes we do these things and we think we're so special. And then somebody said, well, actually, and so, yeah, that granddaddy connection, I love that. That's so wild. Your grandfather with the doves, inventing the dove act,
Yeah.
and here you are, you're the bird girl. This is
Yeah.
does that sound like something right out of a Stan Lee Marvel comic or what?
Yeah, it's a double
Definitely.
pull. It's like the freak show performance pull from the old historical Cuckoo the Bird Girl, Minnie Woolsey, and then my great grandfather, and it's just like both of these spirits have pulled me, and they pulled me to Coney Island. That's where my journey took me. And Coney Island's the last standing freak show, real structure in the world. So there are other traveling freak shows and stuff, but Coney has a home, it has a building, and that's where the spirits pulled me to. It's amazing.
Wow, that's so incredible. Two really incredible stories. I love how the granddaddies go back for both of you and have these connections that
Yeah.
have resulted in this present moment. And one of the good comments in the chat that is related says, so inspirational. This is actually from Steve. and allows us to see how life is an evolution of experiences. Beautiful. That's a beautiful sentiment, Steve. Thank you for sharing that. And I think we're ready to wrap up. It's almost 7:30. I could keep talking forever, but I know people have to do things. This was so incredible. This is like, like my dream coming together and having this conversation and related to the exhibition and talking about all these important topics and just you're sharing your own perspectives and your own voices. So thank you so much, Sarah, and thank you so much, Johnathan, and thank you to everybody who came tonight and posed their questions. It's really been a joy and a pleasure, and I feel really blessed and grateful for this evening and all the support I got to do this event and all the support for both Johnathan and Sarah. And then we got Do It Again, Please. So incredible. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Thank you.
Awesome. And congratulations for your exhibition. It's amazing.
Thank you so much. Thank you very much.
Thank you for including me in
Yeah.
that. I mean, that's really, I'm like, you have no idea. I can barely fit these headphones on my head.
I see it's falling off your ear there. Yeah.
I'm like, ooh, it's getting bigger as we talk. It's a pleasure meeting you, Sarah. I hope I get to meet you in the flesh one day.
Me too. Yes.
This has been wonderful. I've really enjoyed this conversation. Thank you for finding me, and thank you again for your fantastic art and what you're doing to further the conversation about circus. I really, really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you so much. Todd Stefanik from when I was in undergrad, he shares, thank you all for sharing your stories. I really enjoyed the enlightening conversation and insights. Thank you, Todd. Hi, Todd. It's like blast from the past. I love when this like brings people together. So wonderful. Have a good night, everybody. Thank you again. And buy some tickets to Circus and Sideshow and reframe the language. Do your part to advocate.
I love that. That's the way to end it. There you go.
Gotta support.
Good night and good morning to you, Sarah.
Yes. Good morning, Sarah. Enjoy the rest of your day. I'll be going to sleep.
Good morning. Good night.